A lot of you have been asking me to give you my 10 commandments for poetry. And when I say a lot of you, I mean none of you. But I figure you're probably just shy. 1, don't worry about how long your poem is. Obviously, there are exceptions to this. If you have a sonnet which is shorter or longer than 14 lines, you're doing it wrong. But generally speaking, it's up to you to figure out how long it is to get from point A to point B. To paraphrase Roger Ebert, no good poem is ever too long, and no bad poem is ever short enough. I have had my day ruined by a haiku. Alternatively, if you were ever assigned Paradise Lost in school and you didn't get anything out of it, you either had a bad attitude or a bad teacher, and probably both. 2, some people will tell you not to use profanity in your poetry. Fuck that. The problem arises when you use profanity as a substitute for content rather than as a seasoning for it. Going along with this, some people will tell you that if you do use profanity, you should do so sparingly, because the more profanity there is, the less of an impact it has. Fuck that, fuck that, fuck that. This is actually the opposite of the truth. The other day, I told a guy to fuck off 14 times. And guess which one of those 14 times was the one that really pissed him off? Yes, exactly, the 14th. Why do you think I stopped at 14? He was still laughing on number 9. Just remember, it's a seasoning for the content, not a substitute. 3, it's okay to write free verse. Robert Frost said that writing free verse is like playing tennis with a net, without a net. This is nonsense. Sorry, Frosty. Writing free verse is not like playing tennis without a net. It's actually like playing a totally different game that doesn't have a net in the first place without a net. Having said that, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to work with some traditional poetic forms before you start writing your free verse. If you start out by writing something very structured, like a sonnet, when you move on to your free verse, it will have its own natural structure, which will allow you to avoid writing incoherent gibberish, which is usually a waste of the audience's time. It's kind of like learning the chords before you try to play jazz. 4, you should write poems about dogs. Poetry is about expressing the whole range of human emotion, and as Anatole France put it, until one has loved an animal, a part of one's soul remains unawakened. For this reason, it is also technically okay to write poems about cats. 5, you shouldn't write a poem about your most recent breakup unless it is both interesting and original. 6, poems about your most recent breakup are never interesting or original. Notice I used 2 of them on that one. 7, failing to get an emotional reaction with your poem is only a problem if that's what you were trying to do. In fact, if you do get an emotional reaction to a poem which was not written for that purpose, your poem should be immediately destroyed and never spoken of again. Poems about your feelings are great. Poems about your thoughts are great. Poems about what you think about your feelings are great. Poems about how you feel about your thoughts are great. There's nothing but wiggle room here. 8, you should never use big words in your poetry simply to impress upon your audience what an intellectual you are, because that just makes you a pretentious douchebag. However, you also shouldn't avoid using big words in your poetry because you're afraid the audience will think you're a pretentious douchebag. Sometimes a big word is the only word. 9, don't say literally when you mean figuratively. Your divorce did not literally tear you apart. There were not literally 1 million people at the concert. And your coworker did not literally throw you under the bus. Well, probably not for that last one. A growing number of people use literally incorrectly, and there's a school of thought that says, if a word is used incorrectly often enough, it becomes de facto correct. No, not with this. Literally means literally, and I will die on that hill. Figuratively, I will figuratively die on that hill. There's no hill. 10. And this one I feel in the depths of my soul. A description of something that happened to you is not, in and of itself, a poem. Let me say that again. A description of something that happened to you is not, in and of itself, a poem. I'm not saying you shouldn't write about your trauma. On the contrary, you definitely should write about it. But if that writing is to be a poem rather than a journal entry, it needs to transcend its material and take the audience on a journey to true insight, to illuminate a part of the human experience that might otherwise remain in darkness forever. To put it another way, a mediocre piece of writing can make you feel sorry for the author. A good poem makes you feel sorry for yourself because you wish you had written it. Thank you.